item is discussion of goals for redistricting. I'd asked that we put this on there just because I think the last time when the task force was given the responsibility, they're just told basically redistricting. I think that we as a board need to think about what we're trying to accomplish with that redistricting. So I just wanted to throw that out there for everybody. I will say for me, I would like to see that whatever redistricting we do, that it's something that lasts for a child's entire school term. So, I mean, obviously it's going to affect some people, but I would like for this not to be something that we're revisiting in 2 years or 3 years, but something that can be more long-term. That's one of my goals. Any other goals? Mr. Dudley?
Well, I certainly would like to be able to achieve the statement that you just said, that a child, it'd be our hopes that a child wouldn't have to rezone throughout their whole school career. But with Murray County only building schools when it's absolutely a must, I doubt that we will be able to achieve that. I mean, even most of our schools are operating at close to 90% capacity right now, and with the growth going on, you know, it's going to be hard to do that. I mean, I think we can certainly try and do that, but it's going to be tough. Because even with the 2 new schools we have coming on in Spring Hill, you know, the county's still going to have other growth issues that we have to look at.
I was on the task force, and I think one of the things that we concluded is that there would probably have to be every other year maybe some other redistricting, looking at it because of the growth that we're experiencing. I know that our goal in it was to look at where the growth was, the capacity of the schools, where the new schools were going to be built, how we could maybe move some around to create not complete capacity in some of the schools. We spent the majority of our time talking about Spring Hill schools and Columbia schools. We didn't spend a lot of time on the unit schools, and obviously we should have. But I think it would be a great goal if we can say we can rezone this and everybody's going to start kindergarten and go all the way through. But I'm like Mr. Dudley, I'm afraid that's not realistic. And I think that the way the growth is right now is probably something that this board and other boards will have to face going forward.
Well, I would just say that I think in conjunction with this, we don't need to just be talking about redistricting and not talking about what we need to do for facilities. Those go hand in hand. So if we're going to talk about shifting kids to one place, but not really addressing, you know, other needs in the county, then I think that we're doing all of these kids a disservice. So I would just like to see us try to be more holistic about it. And I think that was one of the problems that, to me, for the task force, they couldn't address where we were going to build a new school because that wasn't part of what they were tasked with. I don't know.
All right, I'm still trying to recuperate from here real quick. I think one thing we all agree upon as a board is our number one goal always is to do what's best for the students. And I do think we do have to recognize at the outset, and I discussed this at the task force, we have to recognize every time that we change a boundary, we're affecting real kids and we're affecting real parents. Those are real people. So when we start looking at some of the dots, we have to really be sensitive to that. And I do think we have to recognize at the outset that rezoning, generally speaking, is not good for students. Basically, anytime we do a rezone, we're creating upheaval for those particular students and those parents. Yes, I do recognize that some students are able to cope with that in time after they change environments, but not every student's alike. And there are some students that will not cope. They will have long-term effects from this. And when you think about it, it's each one of those students, they're used to their friends, they have the same faces that they're seeing every day, they're seeing the same cafeteria worker, same teachers, even the same smells of that school. So anytime that we make a change, basically that's a 180-degree change for that student. The very first day that they go to school, everything is going to be different for them. And that's going to be very difficult for some students. That's also hard on the teachers. Teachers already have a lot that's beyond their control. They have a lot of expectations. There's a lot of things that the teachers do not have control over. And anytime that if we disrupt students, that's just one more hurdle for that teacher. And so we as a board, we want to try to always be sensitive to that. We want to try to minimize the hurdles that teachers are having in the classroom. Now, all that being said, sometimes we can't avoid reasoning. Things are not static. We are in a rapidly growing county right now, and we can't have students sitting in the floor, so we just can't keep the status quo in every single school because there's growth that's happening out there. Also, I think Mr. Dudley maybe recognized this as well, or pointed this out, that our commission seems to be tapped out these days as far as what they're providing for funding for new facilities. And so it may very well be that the county and the commission is not going to give us any more funding for any new schools in the years to come. I'm not saying that they will never provide any additional funding, but it will be several years down the road before they provide any additional schools. So what that means is that we are going to have to really maximize every square inch of all of our facilities. We're going to have to get as much out of each one of our facilities as much as possible. So I think ultimately, I think as a board, one of the goals has to be is to how can we minimize impact to students from a rezoning as much as possible within our control. And I think going into this discussion, I think there's a couple of questions that we have to continually ask ourselves. Is this particular rezone necessary? So that's one thing that we have to ask. And then I think we also have to ask with each particular rezone, is the extent of that rezone absolutely necessary? Now, to minimize the impact to our students, I do think, and I think this is something that Ms. Parker mentioned, we have to be smart. We want to try to get as maximized where there's not future disruption as much as possible. What we don't want to be short-sighted that we do a rezone and then 2 or 3 years later we realize we goofed and there's been more development and then we have to move those kids again. And so we want to try to minimize that impact as much as possible. And then I think another goal that we have to keep in mind in order to minimize impact is, and this is something I think from the discussion input during the Culliopa input was very valuable, is that we also have to consider geography. We have to keep in mind that Murray County is actually the 10th largest county in the state of Tennessee. It's a very large county, covers huge swaths of land. And in fact, when we look at our redistricting policy, we have some guidance on what our goals should be in redistricting. It's policy 1.703, and what policy 1.703 says that one of our primary considerations regarding school attendance areas is actually number 3, the geographic location of each school in relation to the surrounding student population. So I think that's something we got to keep in mind. I think that's something that the task force may have, it may have been helpful to get some additional input, and hopefully during this process we'll get some additional input on the geography. Sometimes it may look correct when we draw a line to say, okay, let's just move this many students, but we don't know what the facts of the ground are. There may be there may be a lot of hills and hollows out there, that's going to affect busing, that's going to affect the timing of students being able to get to their school. So that's something else that we have to keep in mind as well.
Anything else?
Pretty well covers it. The effect on students, I think is the number one goal to minimize that. And I'd like to see us use the facilities that we have to the very maximum possibility that we do. And again, the geography, back roads, make it a lot harder than it is paved roads and, streets and within the cities, the larger cities. So the rural areas, I think we have to take that into consideration.
I think there's a potential though for some of those things to be in conflict, in my opinion, just because geography and where schools are located, that, I think we as a county have placed an emphasis on community schools. We have unit schools, we have schools within cities that we've certainly heard from their student body on various things. And so what I felt like the task force did the last time was they just kind of turned the dial. They said, well, go there, we've got a lot of people, so you're going to go down to Mount Pleasant. And they don't identify with Mount Pleasant. We saw that when we first got on the, when I first got on the board, and we had Spring Hill, and we said, oh, look, you're going to go to Cox, or you're going to go to Howard. There's room for you. And they said, we don't identify there. We don't go to church there. We don't play baseball there. We don't do that. And I think that's something that I think we as a board have got to try to figure out. And I would say too, as I told some commissioners, I don't want to go through a zoning process like we did the last time and then have 60 or 70 kids to go to a school that they want to go to if they go out of town. I think that completely undermines what we're trying to do. If we're trying to free up space and then someone says, oh, well, this year I have space, so I can take in 60 or 70 extra kids at a particular school. I mean, we sat through meetings the last time we faced this issue. And then the next year, the principal at that school decided to take in more kids. And I just, I don't want to sit through these meetings if staff and administrators are not committed to what we lay out. I mean, I'm not saying that I want us to do away with out of zone, but I think we have to reconcile how much out of zone we have in this county and what that actually looks like. I think when we start talking about capacity numbers for schools, we've got, 50, 60, 70 kids that are going out of zone. I think we need to know why they're going out of zone. Before we just start saying, oh, well, we've got capacity issues there, we need to build on to that school, or we need to move somebody in redistrict them, and then obviously impact those families. One other thing I would say, it was in Dr. Redistrict's report, but he said that we could not afford to put fifth grade back in the elementary school. I would really like to see our board look at that. I still think that that is something that if we're talking about what's best for children, I think that that is best for children. I think from what I understand from middle school sports, it's kind of like an interesting year for them. They can't really play on the teams. From an academic standpoint, I think that they just they miss out when they're not there in elementary school. I think that at least the teachers that I talked to, they still feel like they're more elementary than they are middle. And so I think if we're going to talk about what's best for students, I would really like to see us look at that as well.
This may fall into you, Mr. Lang, since Dr. Woodard has moved to assistant superintendent, but I would like to clearly be aware of the district's position on out of zone. Because I know there have been some changes, which in some ways it makes sense, but I just need to know where we stand, because it did seem like we made a very purposeful redistricting last time, and then a lot did go out of zone. So for the record, I just want us all to be aware of where we stand from the district, please. or as Dr. Woodard here, I mean, he can speak to it, I know some of the changes took place, but is it an indoor policy, which I think we were moving for?
Currently, the policy is that students apply at the school that they're interested in. The principal makes that decision. We don't go over 5%, 3 to 5%, over. They don't, we ask principals not to allow any more than 3 to 5% out of zone to their school based on their numbers. And then they make a decision whether or not that particular grade level is full or not, and they either deny or accept the out of zone. And then a parent has a right to appeal to my office if the out of zone was denied, and then we move into a different conversation at that point.
I'm just curious for understanding, because I feel like this is a big factor as we are trying to redistrict, because no one wants change. So it would be easy for most people to get rezoned and say, oh, no, I really want to stay here, so I'm going to apply for it. But, like, does there have to be any reason given, or it's simply, I want my child to go here?
Often they do give a reason, and then they fill that information out and give it to the principal of why they're interested in going to that particular school. Quite often, it's the majority is about proximity to transportation, or there's a relative that lives close by that can care for the kid, a grandparent or something. Also, quite often it's academics, and they really want to be challenged or whatnot at a particular level. But most of it is proximity to support for family.
Okay, and a lot of that seems like valid reasons, but, if you're talking about they want their kid to be their child to be challenged, like, I am under the impression that as a district, we're trying to make systemic and systematic changes where all our schools offer the same thing. Is that correct?
That is correct, sure.
I also think we have to be really careful in doing this to maintain the diversity at our schools. We don't rezone large chunks of student population and not maintain that diversity. That's something we have to be very careful.
First of all, let me just say to you, that was one of the things that the task force looked at, gentrification and all that would not happen. I wanted to speak to, and this board knows that I have long been a proponent of the 5th grade going back where they belong. I personally think with the new schools, the elementary school, Wright being enlarged and Spring Hill helping them, that this would be maybe not the first year, but the year that those are open would be the perfect time to move the 5th grade back. I think that we can look at the Columbia schools and see how that would impact it, but I think they are elementary schools that need, students that need to be in an elementary school. I think the middle school setting is an entirely different, and I really think that would be one of the things that I think we ought to look at seriously.
One thing I was just going to touch on as far as the out-of-zone transfers, I do think that we are constrained by state law to allow open enrollment. There's a statute, it's 49-128, where basically the state mandates that we have to have a policy for open enrollment period. Now the statute goes on to say, basically parents are given a choice of a list of schools with available space. And so that's something I think we could conceivably take a look at. And I do think that's reasonable. Hopefully some of that is common sense that's already happening on an administrative level, that, okay, I'm getting to a point where my capacity numbers are getting pretty tight. I may ought to start saying no to out-of-zone transfers. We could continue, and I guess that's probably the way we're doing it right now, is just trusting that the principals are handling that, so we're not really micromanaging that. But we do put in our policy where now, I think our current policy says that out-of-zone transfer parents have to be told that they basically get bumped, that they have no priority over the end zone students. But we could go back and possibly take a look at it. I mean, is there some reasonable figure where you're getting into, I don't know where it goes from green to yellow to red, but maybe when the school gets 85% or 90%, I don't know where that number is, But should that principal start saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'm already getting to this level, I have to say no to any more out-of-zone transfer. So, I mean, I think that's something that's maybe warrants some discussion.
I know one of the points I made when we were doing this previously, and has been a concern of mine with out-of-zone students, is mainly that, you know, we've talked about the impact of the students. So I know a parent may want their child to go somewhere, but I mean, the reality is, we're talking about the students. If we come to a capacity issue at that school, and we got to now ask a student, perhaps even mid-year, to go to another school, that's an impact on the student too. So that's been one of my concerns, that maybe our thresholds are a little too high for that, where we're letting more students in, and then all of a sudden we may run into an issue. We've got to ask them to leave. I would hate that more than anything to be for us to be, you know, November and have to go to a parent and say, I'm sorry, we're out of room. And that's the reason I would have always liked, I would have liked us to have some very clear, I know we've in the past left it to the principals or the administrators of the school to have a more clear, maybe even on policy level, where we have it defined that it's probably a little more conservative. That's where I would lean towards on what the threshold is for allowing out-of-zone students, so we never get into a situation like that. To me, that's just as bad, if not worse, than having to do a reason function, which is bad enough as it is. But to have to potentially ask a student, even though that's a risk that the parent signs up for, nobody wants. And it may be one of those things that they think they have to do, if we ever had to do it. I would just hate that would be a huge impact for the student.
Just to follow up, as of yesterday, the total of early out-of-zone applications we received is 137. We're not talking about 1,000, we're not talking about 2,000. As of yesterday, and it goes through up to May 12th for the early out-of-zone application process. As of yesterday, it was just 137 students requests to go out of zone.
If I can respond a little bit, and that's, I thank you for those numbers, and I would love for us to continue to get additional information on what those out-of-zone are. But again, keep in mind, we're looking at moving a little over 100 and something students out of Holyoke, which is what we talked about. Or moving, when we did the Marvin Wright zone, 117 students. So I think when we're talking about these are some thin margins, maybe it's 20 or 30 students at one school could really impact some decisions we're making. I think that's what we're coming down to. So it may not be a lot on the scope, but just 20 or 25 students at one school could change how we look at making an entire decision. So we are getting down to just talking about 5, 6, 7 students sometimes.
And I know we have on the agenda the materials needed from staff. We can provide to you a listing of up-to-date of all the kids for every school where they're trying to go. So that's something you can use in your decision making.
Would that list also include the kids that are already, the students that are already at that school out of zone?
Yes, it would. It will be on a different spreadsheet, but we can send that to you as well.
Because I think that we
That
need
is
to
correct.
look at what the actual numbers of kids in zone are and how many are out of zone before we start looking at rezoning the kids that are students that are supposed to be going to that school. And I think that would really help us give us those figures and we can do that and see where the detail.
And which ones are tied to staff?
Yeah.
We have that as well.
Okay, thank you.
I just have to say, I feel like the reason that we spent all this time on redistricting is always linked back to, it's based on Dr. Register's report. I personally have not been convinced that Dr. Register's report was very, very valid, so I'm still hopeful that the leadership of our district is going to convince me that this is in our overall plan.
I agree. I'd like to have the actual numbers from the principals as to, because a lot of the rooms are being used for, that are not classrooms, I think were counted in Dr. Register's. I know they weren't supposed to be, but I think that, I don't think we want to do away with these special programs that we have. I would like to know how many students that each school can actually hold capacity. And I think our principals are the best ones. If they have to walk around, figure out how many classrooms they have, storage rooms that can become classrooms, they have to be involved, in that. But, and actually give us a number of what the capacity is, because
Madam Chairman, we have the worksheet that, feedback. We have the worksheet that Dr. Register used. We have taken that worksheet. We actually are starting in the spring. We always do a visit with every school where we walk through the school, do some assessments, meet with the principal. We actually began that today. We're a little bit behind the curve, but we will get all those done in the next couple of weeks. As part of that, we're completing that worksheet again with the principals for each school to show how many available classrooms there are and use the calculations that they use to calculate capacity. So again, by the policy now that was adopted last year, we're to present that to you in October as a part of our annual facilities report. But if we can, I mean, we could possibly have that sooner if you would like to look at that.
That would be, I think that would be
Yeah, just touching on projections, I think projections are only as good as you keep it up to date. And it is a dynamic world out there right now. I mean, I don't know if anybody's noticed on the way down 31 from up north, I mean, the way the traffic is going. I mean, a lot is changing, even since Dr. Register's report, which is now going on 2 years old, believe it or not. And so there's a lot that's changed, and so that has to be updated. I think there's been a lot of new developments that are happening, not just in Spring Hill, but also happening in Columbia. I think another thing that has been a big change, even since the task force met, and I think that's something that a lot of people from Culleoka pointed out, was there's a lot of development that is now occurring south of us. As we look at the Alabama state line, we had Toyota just announced that they're putting 4,000 jobs at the state line. Now we know what a manufacturer, what it does to growth. I mean, we know what happened in Spring Hill with GM. And so 4,000 jobs coming into that area could make a huge long-term impact on growth, on the growth model, not just growth from the north, but also we're going to get sandwiched, I'm afraid, of growth coming up from the south. My understanding is where this particular plant Toyota is building is only an hour away from Culleoka. And my understanding is it's actually quicker for them to drive down to the state line than it is to drive to Nashville. And so that could start impacting that particular area. So I think that's something that we've got to get good information. I think this is something that now and in the future, staff needs to be plugged in to sources of information on basically a quarterly or monthly basis to be able to keep those projections up to date as much as possible. And of course, none of us are going to have a crystal ball. I mean, there's always going to be over forecast or under forecast in whatever we do. But we have to try to do the best job we can with that forecast. And we can't just have somebody come in and say, well, let us know what it's going to look like 5 years from now, and then just leave that on the shelf. I mean, that has to be an ongoing document that's updated constantly. One thing that we may want to take a look at, and staff may want to take a look at, is looking at state resources. There may be a lot of free information out there where state agencies will come in and assist us in this process to be able to give us information as to what is not just your little neck of the woods, but your region. How is it going to be impacted from growth in the next 5 years or 10 years? And they've got models and things like that out there. TDOT is doing this sort of thing all the time and trying to figure out where they're going to have to put the next highway, where they're going to put the next interstate. I think we ought to try to figure out how we can tap into that information, where staff can maybe find a contact at TDOT that might be willing to share with us the regional information as to what's happening. There's also an agency that the commissioners use quite a bit, and I think it probably wouldn't hurt for staff to maybe check with them as well. It's, I think it's CTASC. It's County Technical Assistance, I think is the name of the, I thought I printed off something about that. But it's something that the county commissioners are able to lean on all the time. They go to them if they got a question about something. They can get in contact with them, and my understanding, they'll sometimes even send a representative down, and all different types of things. So I think we ought to maybe reach out to them and see if they would be available to help a school board as well to be able to give us information. We may not have to reinvent the wheel. There may be experts out there at the state level that's already being paid by tax dollars to provide this sort of information to us. So I think that would be something valuable to have and try to figure out what we're doing about the future.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Bates, I agree with you, about what's going on in Alabama, because there's a big push in the Huntsville, northern Alabama area. But with the Toyota plant that you mentioned, they're looking at probably 3 years or more before they even start hiring people. So that gives us plenty of time to make any adjustments, because we don't know exactly how many employees they're going to have. But, I agree with you, we need to keep an eye on it. And as we see the population moving north, we need to make adjustments.
I have a question for staff. Like, at a meeting recently, a county commissioner told us about resources that they have used in the past. I think maybe that commissioner started on school board at one time, and they had utilized resources. Like, did we pursue that and look into that?
If I remember the context of the discussion, and I may be not remembering the right thing, I think that was through the Department of Education that he had suggested those, so we can certainly make those contacts and see. But I'm not familiar with, we have not used those recently, so we will need additional research, but we can do that.
Okay, well, I just want us to have good information to make a decision. And that seemed like a good opportunity to get some good information that had been put on the past.
What was the agency that you said you used?
Is there anything from staff that you feel like we need to be conscious of from a redistricting standpoint if we're talking about?
Basically, obviously, we have 2 new schools that we're planning for, so we need to be prepared to which students are going to go to those schools. Our hopes were to try to have that information available at least a year in advance of the launch of those new schools, because those students all who go to new schools will come from existing schools. And we won't open the door, and I know this is being facetious, but day one, and they'll all be new students. Those will be students who go to school somewhere else primarily right now. So that decision will need to be made. The other thing is that always transportation is part of this, because making sure that we can efficiently transport to wherever it is, obviously working within the guidelines. One of the challenges that we are experiencing from transportation that really may not have to do with student population growth, but has to do with traffic growth on our highways and infrastructure improvements that are happening, which is slowing down traffic. We had a day a couple of weeks ago where the traffic was shut down on Highway 31 because of road improvements being made. At the same time, there was a major wreck on Interstate 65 that was routing traffic around on 412, and we were almost at gridlock at the time that we were supposed to take students home from school. And so that impacts how quickly we can get them home, and that impacts, in some cases, we had trouble even getting buses to the school, much less getting the students home. So all of those roll into this. When you're doing it, it makes it a complex issue, but just that would be our concern, is that we always make sure that we could consider transportation as part of the process, and then that we keep in mind we've got 2 new schools that we're working towards.
Can I? That's so loud, sorry. One thing I think that the folks that worked with the task force would be mindful to remind everyone of is just agreeing on certain things that are set in stone. You talked about capacity numbers, having that agreement on the front end, we're using these numbers and they're not going to vary throughout the process. Also with the out-of-zone numbers or with student numbers. Are at what point do you say we're going to use these student numbers, or are we going to change them if this process takes from now to the end of summer and you see a big growth in one school? Obviously, you have to adjust for that, but at some point you kind of got to say, these are the numbers we're going to use, and we're going to work off of those, and then we'll adjust for growth later on in the process before we're done. But you've got to, that was something that we saw, was just having some set in stone things. And then obviously the direction from you guys on this is what we would like to accomplish. And from the transportation end, as Mr. Breeden said, it's just mindful of certain areas that are long, far-reaching areas. I'm always mindful of the Hardison Mill area out on 412. You can't get them anywhere very quickly. The area up toward Prim Springs, they can't go anywhere very quickly. And that's just as big of an element to my department as the kids who live next door to the school. So just some set in stone things would be all that I would say we maybe need to agree on the front end.
Well, the kids who live next door, you're not transporting, right?
We are not, no, we are not, unless it's across the street on a major highway, yes.
I think what Mr. Reed mentioned as far as the two new schools that are opening in Springfield, I think segue well into what maybe we can talk about as far as priorities for this board in this redistricting process. I am certainly mindful of how long this can take, but also that this board is going to change in the next few months. And so I don't know how much we all want to fight off for those that are not going to be on the board, making those decisions that hopefully will last for a long period of time. But obviously, I know the two schools up in Springfield, you need something to give to those parents. But some of the outlying areas, for me, I don't know that I'm necessarily comfortable rushing to a decision on those. Anybody else?
I guess I would ask what you do in direction, but to me, when I'm looking at the timeline of this, the consideration of the board would be to look at moving, and I'm just prioritizing this myself, the fifth grade issue would be the biggest issue to settle before any of this happens, because we really can't do any kind of redistricting if that's a question the board is going to settle. So I would think we would need to answer that first. I don't know what we need as far as data for that or information from the staff, but I would think, and that would even impact the two new schools, what we're looking at. Because again, the whole process started, we were going to have to make adjustments for those schools, and we're wanting to rebalance some of the other schools at the same time, just to not do it different years and to impact different students. I think that's how it started. But if that's really a discussion that we're going to have, I don't see how we can have any of the other discussions without talking about the fifth grade issue first. So I would think we would have to start there, unless I'm reading it wrong.
I will just add to that, and I'm sure everybody's aware of this, but I don't know, maybe with the exception of Marvin Wright, where we just did addition, if we have any schools that could absorb adding an elementary school that could add a fifth grade with the current space they have. So it would mean, obviously, redistricting to do that. Again, I'm not looking at that right off the top of my head, but I know certainly some of our schools who are very close to capacity, like a Baker, McDowell, even a school like Riverside, which has some capacity, I don't think we could add a fifth grade without shifting some students around. So that would probably be a look at a redistricting plan to accomplish that.
And let me just say, when I say move fifth grade back, I'm not necessarily thinking of K through 5. I recognize the limitations that we have with our current facilities, but I don't know that we can consider doing some K2 and 3 through 5. It's my understanding that I think maybe even Springfield, before that was how it was done, maybe it was Springfield that we on the right was 3 through 5. I don't know if that's true, that was before my time, but I think that that's something that, to me, that would make it to where, and I would love to hear from an academic standpoint how we think that would benefit the students. Because to me, if you're focusing your resources on K through 2, everybody, you have more teachers to pull from when you're talking about other resources that you might want to use and concentrating books in one, for one area as opposed were to have elementary school sports, they're not going to necessarily be able to go from one school to the elementary school to go and participate in one of their elementary cross-country or whatnot that's currently allowed at elementary school. Ms. Short?
You haven't had an opportunity to have an overview of our athletics and arts plan yet. But part of that plan is looking at having a 5th grade opportunities as far as a couple of 3 athletic opportunities at the middle school. So the strategic plan as we move forward in athletics and arts will allow, or if we decide we want to go that route, but it is in the plan we recognize that those students like to participate and would like to be involved in their schools' activities. And we don't want that to be a dead year. We're not talking about academics, but we're talking about as far as school pride, excitement, wanting to get up, wanting to come to school and participate in some extracurricular activities. It is in our strategic plan that we will be sharing soon with you all, at least some highlights of it, that incorporates 5th grade athletics in some areas. So just thought I'd mention that as you process.
But currently, right now, you would agree with me, it is a dead year for this.
Currently, they are not participating in athletic events. That is correct.
But aside from that, not just athletics, there's a tremendous maturity level difference between 5th graders and middle school children. You're throwing really elementary age kids into a middle school setting. As far as the schools and the capacity, Baker had the 5th grade and the 6th grade at one time. I think the move was made years ago because we built a middle school in Spring Hill that wasn't going to reach capacity, and so the idea of moving the 5th grade up there, and then we did it countywide. What a great opportunity we might have that we have the new schools in Spring Hill, that we could make this change and move that 5th grade from Spring Hill Middle, where we're already seeing tremendous overcrowding at that school. I think you'd have to look at Baker and Brown and the Highland and all those, but once again, they were there. I don't think they were moved because those schools needed a move. They were moved in order to accommodate the middle school. It put a huge burden on Whitthorne to do that, but it gave enough students to justify that school. And obviously, the school needed to be built. It was built, and now it has capacity. I think at the time we all kind of went, wait a minute, why are we doing this one first? But now it's a beautiful school, and I'm glad. But I do think the time is that we need to look at if and when we could move the 5th grade back.
I'm not against moving in that. I just have some questions. We have 3 unit schools that have 5th graders in with high schoolers. We're looking at adding on to Mount Pleasant Middle School and put the elementary in there with all of them, with the middle schoolers. So I guess my question is what's the reasoning that it's okay for those 5th graders to go to school with high schoolers, and there doesn't seem to be any problems. I think that they're doing well. But the other schools, we don't want the 5th graders in with the 7th and 8th graders. I don't understand this.
Not just for that. And I'm glad somebody brought up at the beginning about keeping students in mind. My problem with that would be if we split it, but as Chris was saying, splitting it up is just that now you're adding kind of 2 things. You're adding another chain of schools. So if we do the K through, so we're actually adding, and from the information I've seen, that's bad for students. It's really no different than a reason every day. It's like you're changing school one more time. I guess the other thing to keep in mind, if we were to do something like that, we're literally not just rezoning part of the county, we're rezoning everybody in the entire county. So that's a huge, if not half of this population, if you address something. So that starts to really scare me. Because I just want to keep back on what and I agree, 2 new schools coming online, we have some other things we're definitely trying to take care of. And I don't know if it's been mentioned too, I know Mr. Fairman brought this up when we were in the redistricting committee. There was a lot of other things that took place in this redistricting to try to balance some schools out, where some kids, some flow of schools were out of whack, and they've been for a number of years. So that was fixed, I think, from the brought up again since then. So that's the other part that was done. So there's some other pieces of this that probably need to be done sooner rather than later. And so I think we still got to do some kind of redistricting. I just don't know how. Although the idea of moving fifth grade back sounds good to me, I really like the idea. I'm just not sure how we can get there, and we haven't even talked about cost or what it would cost to do that. That's the other piece.
Yeah, it does, I guess, our most immediate thing that's on our plate are these 2 new schools that are coming online in Spring Hill. So I think that's probably the most immediate thing that we've got to take a look at. And I agree that if we are going to have some discussion about moving 5th grade back into elementary school, that's something we need to probably make a decision on pretty quick, because that could hold up that process. So as far as some of the other things that we need to address, I think what we're dealing with is, one, immediate things are getting tight from a capacity standpoint. And then also not just what is on the ground now, but what do we predict in the next however many years we're trying to look out. Is it the next 5 years? So we're not just looking at a school and wondering, is it crowded right now? Part of this process that we're trying to figure out, this is why it's so important to get good, accurate projection information, is we're trying to predict the future. You know, is this school going to be crowded in 3 years? Is this school going to be crowded in 5 years? Because we don't want to do just like we're rezoning all the time. I mean, we want to try to be able to minimize that as much as possible. So it is important to get that type of data so that we can make good decisions. For me, though, I think one thing that's critical, bit of information in dealing with that crowding issue at some of the schools is part of that long-range process 5 to 2 years down the road. You know, again, from a long-range planning standpoint, in the next 5 years, do we really need to be looking at building a new school? Is rezoning just a Band-Aid? Is that just a stopgap measure to get you to that point? So I do think that that's, for me, some of these other discussions at some of the other schools, I need some analysis or some thought as to, for example, if we are going to support community schools, are we going to take a look at H.O. Porter, at moving a school back into that community? If we're doing that, and if that's part of our long-range plan over the next 5 years to be building a new school or to have another elementary school at that location, that changes the dynamics of things as far as what the crowding issues are. It may be, you know, going back to the earlier questions that I mentioned before, is the rezoning necessary? It may be that I can get by with a smaller rezone because it's just a stopgap. I'm going from point A to point B. So point A, I can minimize that. I don't have to be as disruptive to those students because I'm already planning down the road at year 5 that another elementary school is coming online. And so that's going to be dealing with that capacity issue. The same thing with Holyoke. I think we need to have some discussion about that. What are the needs? What are the things that we need to do to address those needs? If we are looking, and in partnership with the commission, if we're looking at, can we get by with just an addition, or is it that we need to actually be looking at building a new school in that area? If we are going to be building a new school and adding that much capacity online in the next 5 to 10 years, that changes the dynamics in my mind as to what do we need to do to get from point A to point B. So I think that's something that I think, yes, to me, the Spring Hill, the 2 new schools coming to Spring Hill are a little bit more straightforward. I mean, we know that those schools are coming online. It's just a matter of figuring out, you know, what are going to be the feeder paths to those particular schools, and how can that help at some of the other schools like Spring Hill Elementary, I think, could help to relieve some of the burden there. But that seems to be pretty straightforward. Some of these other things, I think, it's not just a rezoning question in my mind, it's also the long-range planning part of this. And so that's just, I don't know what staff can do, or maybe we can have some of those discussions about what is our long-range plan. And this goes back to, I think it's fundamental to figure out what we need to do over the next 5 to 10 years. We've got to have good information to have as good of a crystal ball as possible. What's it going to look like in 5 to 10 years? I mean, Maury County may be on the edge of a very dynamic change. I mean, what we've been used to over the past 10 years or 20 years as far as a gradual growth pattern, that may continue on. On the other hand, we could be entering into another world right now where the dynamics are changing, where it's not just a continuing growth pattern, but an escalating growth pattern. And that's one of my concerns. I know that's happening in other places in Middle Tennessee. It's not just a 5% growth, 5% growth, 5% growth. It's 5% growth, 7% growth, 9% growth. It's escalating. And that throws everything off. And if we're not careful, we could get caught flat-footed. And if we're not careful, we could make some decisions that could be short-term and short-sighted, and we could end up having to come right back where we're at right now in a couple of years and have to rechange everything. So.
I'll say one more thing, I'll stop. And I've brought this up a couple of times. I think it is, yeah, Mr. Bates, I appreciate that, because I think you're exactly right. I think it is past time that we as a district have a dedicated team that's handling this data and evaluating it constantly. And I know we've got people that are doing it, including other tasks, but I think we're at the point where we just can't bring this stuff up when it kind of comes up. And I don't think we currently have the resources or the staff dedicated to it. We should be dedicated to it. And I would like to see it. If we're talking about goals, I'll go back to that part. My goal would be to have that properly funded and staffed, whatever that staff determines that needs to be, so that these decisions are being made favorably. The data is compiled literally daily, where they can keep up with this information. And then the decisions on how to do this is based on the strategic plan that comes from the staff on how we're going to move forward as a district. I would feel much more comfortable if that's not coming from board members on this. I would really like to see it as part of a plan of what we're doing moving forward. And it may need to be adjusted as we go, but it should be part of that plan.
I was just going to say, and then again, it goes back to the critical part of just getting good data. We want it as a board, and I think we're getting there where we're more proactive. I think in years past, it was always being reactive. It was, hey, so many kids showed up in August. What are we going to do? If you're just dealing with problems as they arise, you're already too late. And you've already caused heartache for those parents, heartache for those students, and you're not really planning. You're just reacting. And so that's one of the things I think is critical for us to look out. If we're looking at just what the needs are right now, we're already 3 years behind. What we're looking at right now is not now. We're actually looking at trying to figure out what is going to be the situation over the next 5 to 10 year period, and trying to make a logical plan the best that we can. And it's not going to be perfect, but trying to make that plan out the best that we can so that it's not disruptive. Because if we get to the point where we realize, oh, we need a new school, if we make that decision today, that is 3 years before it's going to come online. I mean, we know that process of going through the county commission, getting the designs, getting the construction, getting the land, all those things. So if we're waiting to that point, we've already waited too late.
Well, I agree with what Mr. Moore is saying to a degree, but at the same time, it's hard to set aside funds to hire those people to do that limited job. When on the day-to-day complaint we hear that our students don't have textbooks, we can't find the funding to just jump immediately into this one-to-one program. Our system is still financially strapped in so many areas, and to have a dedicated staff that is, their scope of work is limited to one segment. I mean, every one of our department heads is wearing multiple hats because we're still financially strapped. maybe we need to relook at our facilities as a whole. Maybe instead of the county and the government and the school system owning all the facilities, maybe we need to rent school facilities from third party or private vendors. And then that way, if we need additional space, we call them up on the phone and say, hey, next year we're going to need additional school, and we're willing to rent it from you. Or, guess what? We're overcrowded. You're the one that bit the bullet and built that facility. You're on the hook for it. So our government as a whole has got to get creative in our facilities.
This will only be an hour, so we've got 2 minutes left. I guess as far as materials needed from staff, I know I think it all kind of prioritized the Springfield schools, the new ones that are coming online. Can y'all provide us that information at the next meeting with what the direction is you would want to go there? And I will say, as far as 5th grade, I don't think that they're going to the same campus. So if we were to decide that we were going to move them, I would not think that that's going to be too terribly traumatic, since they're going to be routed onto the same campus. But if you can get us that information for the next meeting, I think that would be helpful. And then also, Mr. Moore mentioned that at the task force, there were some things that your staff, Mr. Fairman, had fixed, where maybe somebody was going to Brown, and then they were going to Mount Pleasant, or things like that. If you can bring that information to us, I think maybe we can try and address some of this low-hanging fruit, I guess is what I would kind of like to call it. Is that?
That's very possible. Do you want, we gave options to the task force on the new schools, and then they narrowed to one. Would you like all of the options or all of the scenarios that we brought? Not an option, but we brought 3 different scenarios to them as to how we thought it could fit in, and then they narrowed to one that they thought made the most sense. Do you want just it? Do you want the others? Or would you like to see it, and if it doesn't make sense, have the others? I mean, I don't know how you want that.
I think we need to look at all 3. I'd like to look at all 3 and see, since I wasn't on the task force, and I'd like to see what all 3 of the suggestions that you have, and I think that would be good, that would suffice. I would really like to know what the capacities of each of our schools, every school that we have, and the capacities that our staff comes up with. I don't know, Mr. Friedman, if you can do that by our next meeting, but I'd really like to see that, and I'd like to see what our registered with no out of zone are at each of those. So we can see where there's a problem, if there is a problem.
I just don't see any way that we can be able to get that done in a week. We're talking about meeting next week. We could possibly have that ready for by June meeting. I was thinking of May work session, but that's just in a couple of weeks, so that's not very long. But we might could have it ready by a May board meeting, but we need a few weeks because we need to gather. That really is going to take some input from the administrators, so we need some contact with them.
I would think the administrators, maybe get them through the end of the year, and maybe into the school year, and then in June, maybe we can revisit that particular topic. I think that if we're trying to limit these meetings to an hour, let's try and tackle this. I think maybe try and tackle the things in Spring Hill. If we're going to go through all 3 scenarios, and that probably should take us through the hour, and then we can revisit what else we need. But I think staff has a pretty clear understanding of maybe some of the materials that we need, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Ms. Burr. I think that gives them the direction on that.
Stan, if possible, I know we've got some preliminary capacity numbers from schools, and this may just be a short way to get us a working number, but can we not just run that number for each school by the administrator?
Yeah, we have those numbers that were calculated.
What I'm saying is the administrator should be pretty quick and say, that looks close, or no, that's way off. That at least gives us kind of a red light, green light, at least to know whether, 70% of the numbers the staff feels like it gives us a starting point.
Just one other thing, and we may get this when we get the capacity information, but I think we need solid enrollment numbers. I mean, no guessing. I want to know what was the enrollment at the beginning of the school year. I don't know what is the correct date to use. I think generally they look at like some September date but we need to know that solid number. And what is the solid enrollment number now at the end of the year? I mean, we should be able to get the May end dates. And I would like to see, what is the enrollment change between the beginning of the school year to the end of the end of the school year, and be able to compare that so we can start. We've got our own data that shows some information as to growth. So I'd like to get solid numbers.
I agree. I think we need capacity and enrollment numbers. We need numbers, but I just have to say, having sat here for an hour and, having been on the board for 3.5 years, I'm comparing where we are today with where we were 2 years ago. We are all over the place. I don't think we're moving forward at all. I'm really ready to see some firm decisions be made in the context that you were speaking to, Mr. Perrin, and you said you're looking to direction from us. I am not an urban planner. I am not going to be an urban planner between now and my time off the board. I'm looking to y'all. But, we're hashing out whether 5th grade is or is not good for kids in middle, whether it's elementary or middle. I am not going to be able to give y'all that answer. I have 3 children, 2 have been through 5th grade in middle school. I do not think it's the best place. Whereas Ms. Morency, I'm not sure where her data is coming from, is saying that she feels like they're doing well. But I'm looking to y'all for those answers. I need those answers from a loud, clear voice. I think that's what our administration is being paid for, and I really need them so that we can move forward. We spent a lot of time on a strategic plan, so why are we flailing up here? I am very confused, and I would really like to see actual progress.
Well, I just want to correct you. I didn't say that I thought they were doing well. I was asking the question, what are the problems? Because I don't know. So that was the question. I didn't say that I thought they were fine.
Well, when I was taking it, I did say that you said they were doing well in the unit school.
I said they seem to be doing well.
I
And there's
seem
a
to
difference.
see
Okay.
3 little people every day, and I would beg to differ.
And that's fine. I just haven't heard any problems that 5th graders are having in their schools.
But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm looking to the people who are getting paid from an educational standpoint, and I don't feel like we're getting any feedback. But I'm ready for us to actually make progress. But we circle back to the same thing. So are these numbers correct? We've been talking about this for a very long time. We have got to get some firm direction and go.
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Powers. We ask a whole lot from our staff every day. They got their plate running for them. And when we talk about bringing 3 scenarios back to us, we're not the experts. They're the experts. They should make a decision and bring it to us. And if we got to sit here and decide which one is which, we're wasting our time, wasting their time.
I have to agree, Mr. Beaver. I'm listening to you all ask the exact same questions and discussions in the task force there. Eric Pearman knows where every turnaround, every road, every child, he can touch the thing and he knows he knows what was the best, safest place where you could redistrict and you'd be able to get the bus, and we got time that you can only have them on a bus. All of that was so interesting, but they provided us all that information, capacity, how many was in the school presently at that time, also how many were out of zone. And we considered out of zone, even though we had to really not consider them for capacity. The task force, even though we've gotten a lot of feedback about one school, but most of the time, 90% of the time was probably spent looking at the numbers, to make a choice between the choices we were given, and now you're asking to do exactly the same thing that the task force did. There were 25 people on that committee. Mr. Lang and Eric and Stan did all the preliminary work for us, and we asked them a million questions. Is that what we want to do? We want to start over, do it again? Mr. Moore was on the committee, Mr. Bates, do you not feel like they gave us good numbers, good facts as to how many were out of zone? And that decisions were made with the best of your shaking your head yes? So do we start over?
Wasn't on the task force. I don't know what to rely on, what the three of y'all did. I'm just, to fully represent my district, I feel like I need to know where I need that information. And so I don't know how long.
Oh, I think they should bring the information.
Right, I think we need to, I think this is the process that we need to go through as
Okay.
elected officials.
Yeah, my question would be, if the task force did everything right, then why are we sitting here?
Right.
Why was it brought back to the board? Because if we're gonna take exactly what the task force said, then there's no reason for us to be spending our time spending our time going over. I do not want to put my name on something that I have no idea what was done.
I agree, and if we want to go through it, I think that probably there was, when we had the public meeting, there wasn't anyone, maybe a couple of them that spoke to the Spring Hill, Central, that area, but other than that, Culleoka was a big concern. And as I said, it was not something we spent a lot of time on. We didn't look at the geographics of it. I would be happy to say I would be happy with all of what the task force has done with deleting Culleoka from that and looking at Culleoka going forward. Yes, I think we're just going to probably end up with the same scenario. I think you all definitely need to be informed, but I just wanted you to know that a lot of time and effort was spent bringing those numbers to us, and the biggest concern has been on the Culleoka school. I think that would just be a decision that we need to make as a board, is to what part of that task force report we want to look at specifically, or do we want to delete or delay anything?
I would say for me, I think everything needs to be on the table. I don't want to just look at Culleoka and say that one issue is the one thing that I'm not satisfied with the task force. Because I did speak to some people that did serve on the task force, and they told me, it's all going to come back before you guys in a couple of years. Chris, you didn't do anything for Columbia. You didn't address the issues in Columbia. That's what I was told. The same people who supposedly voted didn't vote on it because they didn't like it. They didn't agree with it. They sat through the meetings. So I think that, again, there's more than just Culleoka. I know we have a lot of people here that are interested in Culleoka, but I think it's really hard to make a decision about one particular school. We have 22 other schools and we're about to have 4 coming online. I think we just have to look at it holistically, is my impression. I'm not saying that the work that was done in the task force was not done well. I think that should make it a lot easier for staff, because I don't think they're going to have that, to take that much time to pull more information together, because they have all that information pulled together from before. But ultimately, I appreciate what Mr. Perryman does, but he's not the one that has to answer to his constituents. And so while he may know every nook and cranny in this county, that's great, and that is a resource that we need to use. But he also didn't say that, that we heard issues about the geography for people trying to relate from Culleoka to Mount Pleasant. And I don't know if that was brought up to the task force. So if we just go through this process, it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be painful, but if we just all try to work together, I think we can get where we need to get to. And it's not going to be perfect. And I think we know that, but we're just going to have to do the best we can to make sure we keep the interest of the students first. I think that was the goal that we all came up with.
So, Madam Chairman, we just, and I know there's differencing opinions here, and y'all didn't vote on anything, but clear direction as to what we're supposed to bring next time, just to make sure I can restate that, to make sure we understand. And that is, we're supposed to bring the information for the 2 new schools and the other schools that impacts. And then the other areas that we talked about, adjustments were being made because they were unusual situations that had been created through redistricting in the past. That's the only 2 things we are going, or was there something else?
I think we should go there and then have the remainder of the time for us to figure out where we're going to go on the next.
And we can show you capacity numbers on all those schools that are impacted based on today's capacity calculations. we can review those with administrators. Cool, what? Do you want us to go, because we created all this based on enrollment figures when we did this work. Do you want us to update enrollment figures or just go ahead and use what we've got? Because if we use what we've got, as you say, it's pretty easy to turn that around. If we're going to go back and re-enroll and run maps and do that, that's a pretty big task for 1 week.
Yeah, I don't know if we need that, need that redrawn at this point.
Cool.
I mean, I don't know.
But,
She wants to figure it out. Yeah.
so if we could bring you what was presented, exactly what was presented to the task force for those schools, that'd be very helpful. And I think that would give you the information you need.
What were the dates that that was presented?
That was done in September and October
17?
of 17. So it was numbers as of last fall. Yeah.
You know, this morning it's zoning, tonight it's going to be budget. These are all just one of many issues. And I just have to speak to, we all went through TSBA. We heard what we should be dealing with to be an efficient school board member. Okay? We are micromanaging. I maintain we are micromanaging because we do not have good leadership. I do not think that we are being efficient, focusing on our role in things that then come back for kids. I think we would be more efficient if we had more confidence in our superintendent and trusted him at a different level. He has not said one word all day, and I just am very appalled at where we are and how we are rolling with this.
Okay, and I'm going to push back on this. The majority of this board does have confidence in our superintendent. I think that we should that. When I came on this board, I was told that once a decision is made by the board, it's everybody's decision. It is a board decision and it goes to everybody. I think that a lot of us are trying to micromanage because we want things our way and aren't willing to give up the power to the people that should have it. So I'm pushing back on what you said. I have confidence in our management and our staff, and I think that there is too much micromanagement. Absolutely.
I hate to cut this conversation short,